Carl Hopkins.
Here.
Bruce Miller.
Here.
Craig Arcuri.
Here.
Dolores Johnson.
Here.
Karen Kahn.
Here.
Kirk Martin.
Here.
Jim Wilson.
Here.
Thank you.
Any changes to the agenda?
No changes, Mr. Chair.
Public comment, any public comment, speaker slips?
No speaker slips either. No.
All right, consent calendar, subject, a variety of things here. We have the recommendation to waive the reading and approve the minutes of the last meeting on September 19th. We have a lease amendment with Above All Aviation. We have a lease agreement with Microdyne Nadir. We have a lease agreement with MUFG Union Bank. And we have a lease agreement with Siempre Manana, Janicare. Here we go. And we have the property management report for September 2016. Do I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second.
Moved twice and seconded once. I think that's good enough. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It passes. Notices. Notice that on Friday, October 14th at 5 p.m., the Airport Commission Secretary duly posted this agenda on the bulletin board at the Airport Administration. Liaison reports. City of Santa Barbara, Councilman Frank Hotchkiss. What have you got for us, sir?
Thank you, sir. Well, first, not that, some less than good news. The desal plant, you don't just stick a hose in the water and start pulling water out. There has to be a whole sort of maturation and process of algae growth, et cetera. And we won't get the proper filters in until the end of October. And so what this all means is that actual functioning may be put off beyond January to February or March. Okay, so that's the bad news. Now this is now something totally out of school. And I hope I don't get censored for this, but I wanted to recommend to everyone to see the film Sully. It is, have any of you seen it yet?
Yeah.
It was so good, so well done. And one of the things that I really loved was, you know, it's not an action film in the sense that we all know that he ends up in the water. That part is interesting, but what is really interesting is the interplay between the NTSB and the pilots immediately after it happened, and recreation that they disagreed with what he did. In fact, they thought they were kind of going to hang him out to dry. And so they had a reenactment, and this is the part that I wanted to tell you, Karen, about. The reenactment with two separate crews in trainers, and in one case, the captain was a lady, and in the other case, the first officer was a lady. So I know that that had to be a reproduction of the real deal, because they wouldn't dare have done that on their own. But, and I only say that in passing, but maybe that means it shows that I'm a real male chauvinist pig. But I was surprised, and I thought that was great what they did. And in any case, it's a wonderfully encouraging film for anybody who flies or doesn't fly. Thanks for listening.
Frank, I should mention that the one comment that pilots have who are familiar with the film is that the portion about the NTSB trying to do in the crew is the part that wasn't actually true. That it was staged to give a little drama, but that actually in this event there was quite a good bit of working together.
I see.
So,
Collateral. Yeah.
so I think the NTSB trying to do them in is a nice bit of drama, but my understanding is it didn't happen.
Well, thanks for letting me know, because I agree that that was good drama, and I thought Clint Eastwood did a heck of a job directing it, and if I ever get to meet him, I'll bring that point up.
And next, from City of Goleta.
No report, and I certainly couldn't top that.
Okay, so we have some administrative reports. The first item is fiscal year 18 through 23. Boy, that seems like a long ways away. Capital Improvement Program.
Yes, Commission tonight, Andrew Vermont, our airport planner, will provide a overview of our capital improvement program, keeping in mind the first 2 years will be part of the budget based on funds available, and the rest of it is a plan. It's not a budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Hazel. This is a lot to go over. I'm going to try to be quick so so that we can get to your questions and comments. The purpose of the meeting is for Airport Commission to ask questions and provide comment on the draft airport section of the capital improvement program that will go to Planning Commission and ultimately City Council in 2017. At the airport, we answer to a number of bosses. Each has their own protocol for capital planning. The FAA has a airport's capital improvement plan that we submit annually. It's a 5-year program. That Caltrans obligates us to do every 2 years a 10-year capital program. So that goes out to 2027 is the next one that we'll do. And then we also do this process today, the city's capital improvement program, every 2 years in concert with the 2-year city budget. And the city charter provides some guidance as to what the capital improvement program is supposed to include. It's supposed to be a clear general summary of the city's capital needs. Over a 5-year period, we do a 6-year period because it's for a 2-year budget, so that second year still has the 5-year program. It needs to include cost estimates and also estimates of annual operating costs of whatever the new facility is. The city administrator advises that this is a planning document. The first 2 years should be considered budget ready, with outer years used principally for identifying needs that aren't constrained by funding availability, so that we can demonstrate where it is that perhaps we have a budget shortfall for our capital needs. The CIP is an involved process that takes about 6 months to get through. At the moment, we are ahead of schedule. We are accomplishing our November goals already. So we will be getting our sections into the Public Works Department this month, and then in December they bring forward a draft to Planning Commission. There will be a hearing in early next year. And per the charter, City Council has to review this 3 months before they have the budget hearing, so they're targeting March. Okay, and then also attached to the memo that was given to you on this item, I have a summary sheet that shows the projects roughly in chronological order, but they're broken out between whether they are a federally funded project through the FAA's Airport Improvement Program, or they're simply locally funded. And so the top ones that we'll go through first are the FAA AIP eligible projects. Also, in this year, the project pages have a number of different elements to them that are new. We identify the type of infrastructure and what the driving priorities are for each item. And one of the things that through the last CIP process that Planning Commission was interested in was what the drivers were, whether this was being driven by funding or a lack of funding, or whether it's really meeting an unmet or addressing an unmet need. So in total, we have 46.2 million projects to consider for the next 6 years, which is an awful lot. Much of that is covered in the airport's improvement program, and I'll get into those in more detail. The first one that we'll be doing in fiscal year 2018 is a rehab of runway 725. In 2019, the projects include a security system upgrade and the planning phase of taxiway hotel extension. The taxiway hotel extension project will be a multi-year project that involves a number of planning and permitting obstacles, environmental mitigation, relocation of sewer lines, and coordination with a number of federal agencies, not just the FAA. So once we've completed that major project, we'd be in 2021 looking at both acquiring a new ARF vehicle to replace one of our 2 existing firefighting trucks at Station 8. And we'd also be repaving a portion of Taxiway Delta and the northeast GA pavement by the hangar at 495 Fairview. Following that, in 2022, we have a rehabilitation of taxiways Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie. And then in 2023, we have a sweeper replacement, replacement of existing GA pavement. We have a number of areas where we have pavement that's original to the Marine Corps Air Station that's at the end of its useful life and needs replacement, so we're always looking at opportunities to do that, as well as acquisition of land that's in the runway protection zone for 725 on the east end. Sorry. Yes.
Could you back up one?
Yes, sir.
This is the GA pavement rehabilitation. On this,
Oh, yes, I see. My slide's incorrect. It should be
300,000 or 1.225?
the paperwork's correct. That's
The
an error on
paperwork's
the slide.
correct, so
Thank you.
it's 1.225.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and what part of the airport is that?
To be determined.
To be determined.
It could be any
Okay.
number of places, yes. We have some priority places near the self-service fueling facility, also just outside of this building.
Okay.
But we would look at where the pavement was in the greatest need in that year. And they degrade at varying rates depending on a number of factors, so I don't want to nail us down to any particular location at this point.
Once the new FBO leases are done and the FBOs move, the ramp space that they occupy, is the airport responsible for maintaining that, or does the FBO become responsible for maintaining that?
That would be an item for negotiation.
Okay. All right, thank you.
All right, so I'll move forward to the projects that are perhaps more difficult to execute because they're entirely locally funded. There's not an identified grant source for these. These come out of the airport department's budget. The first several of them are projects that you'll notice exist in each of the identified years. These are projects that are continually addressing an ongoing capital need for a number of our facilities. The first of which on the list is the leased building maintenance. Those are the buildings that we have that the airport rents out that need to go through some improvements such as a re-roof or HVAC repair. And so we've identified $150,000 per year as a program to go through. Similarly, with the street resurfacing program, that's a program there where we go through and not just airport maintained streets, but also the long-term parking lot and short-term parking lot where you do pavement maintenance there. The same idea on the air side. The AOA maintenance is an annual program to patch and repair pavement, replace markings and signage as necessary. The airport also has its own utility infrastructure for water and sewer and storm drains that, again, is something that has a consistent replacement and repair need that's identified annually in the CIP. And similar to the leased building maintenance, this is one of the leased buildings, but it's a significant one. It's the airline terminal. We are looking at fiscal year 2018 doing a substantial crack fill and repaint effort, and then there are similarly roof, HVAC, door and window maintenance needs at that building. Now for the more discrete projects, we have the building at 6150 and 6190 Francis Botello Road. That's across the street from the direct relief construction site, where we have a building 225, which is original to the Marine Corps Air Station, but has been maintained over the years, so it's not a historic building, but it's a building that is in need of a facelift and ADA improvements. So this would be a project to bring that up to modern standards. We also have inside the airline terminal a automated exit system. This would be an anti-passback control system to avoid the need for a human being to be monitoring the exit door at all hours that the terminal is operating. So this has a considerable operating budget savings component, assuming that it can be done consistent with TSA standards. We also will acquire back from Ampersand Aviation, the hangar at 495 Fairview Avenue. That is a substantial structure with substantial maintenance needs that we would need to take on and address starting in 2018. So we have that for fiscal year 2019, $250,000, and then ongoing approximately $100,000 per year. We're also looking at adding our fourth boarding bridge at Gate 3. That was removed from the terminal project for budget reasons back in 2009. So this project would complete that project. Similarly, the terminal hearing loop would include a ADA compliance measure to allow for anyone who uses a hearing assistance device, a hearing aid that has a T-coil, to receive the terminal announcements directly rather than trying to pick them up over the air, which can be difficult. Also for fiscal year 2021, we have the second phase of the light industrial project at 6100 Hollister Avenue. That was approved at Planning Commission earlier this month, but it was envisioned to be constructed in 2 phases. Phase 1 would occur next year, starting on the Frederick Lopez side, the east side. Phase 2 would be a building on the David Love side.
So phase 1 is not in this because it's already in the current budget?
It's in the current budget.
Current funds.
Yes.
Okay.
Also for fiscal year 2021, we have a replacement of the maintenance yard fuel tank. That is an underground fuel tank that was installed in the 1990s, so it's in good condition. However, per city policy, we are replacing all underground fuel tanks with above ground fuel tanks. Also, as the FBO relocation project takes place, there are some facilities that will be displaced. So in 2022, we would be constructing a new aircraft wash rack to replace the old one. We also have identified relocation of this office at the 601 Firestone Road to the offices at 495 Fairview, again, in order to accommodate relocation of the FBOs to this location. Another project that's is one that I think is really only going to be accomplished if we can identify some outside grant funding, is the Hollister Avenue drainage improvement. The wetlands on the south of Hollister Avenue across the street from the Willow Springs development flood relatively easily. In even a light storm, we can have flooding on Hollister Avenue, and that's a vital access road to not just the airport, but regionally. So improving that habitat and improving flood flows would abate a public nuisance and hazard. Also, we have parcel 17, 801 Frederick Lopez Road, a new light industrial project, be 6,000 square feet on a relatively small lot. We've completed the public improvements and identified what our landscaping and building costs would be, but I think that number will go up by the time we get to 2023. We've also identified, as part of the airport master plan, the need to address the General Western Aero hangars. They're also known as the Boneyard hangars over on the northeast corner of the airfield. They're the 2 oldest hangars on the airport, but they're in very poor condition, and they are also in the floodway, which makes them particularly unsuitable for restoration at that site. So we'd be looking at identifying a location to relocate them to and rehabilitate them in a new location consistent with the Secretary of Interior's standards for doing such things.
If
Yes,
I
Mr. Chair.
recall right, the master plan that mentioned this had an estimated cost of $2.25 million. How did it drop to $750, or am I remembering something wrong?
There were a number of proposals considered in the airport master plan, and off the top of my head, I can't say what the prices were for each, but I think that this could also be a number that would be revised in the next week or so.
Thank you.
Finally, on this long list of projects, we had the airline equipment maintenance facility. Currently, the airline equipment sits exposed to the elements. It is maintained and stored out in the elements. we would construct roughly a carport where we erect solar panels in order to generate some power, in order to get them out of the elements so that they can be, this is both a way to keep that equipment useful for longer, but also it is a stormwater improvement program. This would also include a lavatory dump facility so that we do not have airline staff driving approximately a mile around an active runway in order to complete a routine operation. And so that concludes all of the projects that we've identified so far for the airport's contribution to the capital improvement program. And I'll be happy to address questions as I can. Thank you.
Any
So-
questions?
I'll open with a comment that, as noticed, the Budget Subcommittee did meet this afternoon at 4 p.m. and discussed this in considerable detail. That's Commissioners Wilson, Arcuri, and myself. My perception of it is it seems very well thought out. There was that one, we'd also noticed the question about the Western Aero hangars and that number, which already indicated they were going to be revising. And I think, as I said, it seems very well thought out and prioritized. And maybe other commissioners of the subcommittee might have some comments on their interpretation.
Well, and just I would echo your your comments. We went through item by item, pretty thorough description, and you know, recognize that the later years are better than a guesstimate, but definitely not as accurate as a budgeted number, and you know, are subject to change. So this is our, you know, significant best effort in identifying the costs associated with those. I think you know, we changed to moving the things that are going to be funded by primarily funded by FAA grants to the top, which clearly identifies, you know, capital projects that are going to have significant offsets from our taxpayer dollars. And I think that was a very good change. So you know, I echo Bruce's comments. I mean, we went through it page by page in detail, and certainly think it's a lot of good work, and understand that there's a few cells that didn't add up, and you're busy working on that.
Well, I think it's important to note that this is a comprehensive list. Doesn't depend upon having funding identified. So it's not just the things that we think we can do, leaving some smoking guns off the list that'll come along to bite us later. It seems to be a very comprehensive list of the things that we can foresee doing, and it keeps them in front of us so that when they do come up, we'll have to go find funding for them.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is a triennial emergency exercise. Recommendation of the Airport Commission receive a debrief on the triennial emergency exercise held September 20th, 2016.
That's correct. And tonight, Kelly Reed, our operations supervisor, and Tracy Lincoln, ops manager, will give you an overview of the FAA required live drill, and it was pretty successful, I think. Kelly?
It was successful indeed. So just a little bit about our airport. We are a commercially certified airport. We fall under Part 139 in the FAA's regulations. As a Part 139 airport, we're considered Class 1, Index B. Class 1 meaning that we have scheduled large air carrier operations, and Index B meaning that we can accommodate aircraft up to 126 feet in length, and we base our drill off of those statistics. So the drill, the triennial drill, is a requirement of our airport emergency program or emergency plan. Every year we test and review our plan in a tabletop exercise. However, every 3 years we're required to do a full-scale exercise. And this is where the fun is, where we get together and we plan for several months with all of our mutual aid partners and come up with an exercise and then walk through all the steps of what we would actually be doing in a real emergency. And on September 20th is when we held our Triennial this year, and next time we will be doing it is 2019. So basically the day of the drill, it starts out with, the actual drill starts with the crash phone. The notification comes from air traffic control, as it would most likely real world scenario. Either a controller is going to see an accident, or they will get information from a pilot, give us a heads up if they get that. And in this case, our first responders were Station 8, ARF, stands for Airport Rescue Firefighting, Airport Patrol, and Airport Operations. And I'll explain just the flow. Air traffic control sends the information out with the crash phone. The crash phone goes directly to our airport SOC, our Security Operations Center, to Station 8, to Santa Barbara Police Dispatch, and Airport Administration gets the information at the same time. Then the SOC staff declares the type of alert, that's internally, so we know what we're responding to. In this case, it was an Alert 3, which is an actual accident. And then both SOC and Santa Barbara Police will dispatch as needed, depending on the type of accident. So here I've got a map of our drill site. As you can see, we've got several different things going on here. It's a great map that the fire department put together for us. The yellow boxes on the top there identify 2 different areas. If you look, the one on the bottom, I don't know if there's a pointer on here.
Do we have a cursor maybe?
The actual drill location, or the crash location, was on runway 15 right on the north end of the runway. Just north of that is where we staged our victim triage area. And then concurrent with the actual drill site and where the victims were, we had the Friends and Family Plan, or the Friends and Family Center, going on in the historic terminal over adjacent to our commercial airline terminal. So basically we've got a lot going on during the drill. So we have 3 different active locations throughout the drill. So the scenario for the flight is that we had a mock airline, California Airlines Flight 0920. It was an Embraer 175, which is the largest aircraft that operates regularly at this airport currently. The scenario is that they were arriving runway 25. They had a right main gear collapse and veered off the runway to the right, coming to rest at runway 15 right and taxiway Charlie. We prepared a script for air traffic control, and they just read the script over the frequency to on the crash phone, so that everyone got the information at the same time. And they did provide notification that there was aircraft damage from impact forces and a post-crash fire. So our responders, first out were ARF Station 8 and Airport Patrol. Station 8 is responding to mitigate the fire immediately. They're the first ones out there. And as soon as the fire's out, they would immediately start responding to victims. Airport Patrol's role is to go out and secure the scene, and as they are able, they'll assist and maybe corral some of the people that are walking wounded. Airport Operations is also first responder. We head out to the airport and basically give a full airfield assessment. We do a quick inspection and figure out what parts of the airport are affected, what we have to close, and what we can leave open. In the case of a real accident, we would be closing the whole airport. And then airport maintenance also responds, and they help bring in the mutual aid as they arrive for the accident. So this is the real site as it looked when the mutual aid responders were arriving. In this case, we used a bus to simulate an aircraft and theatrical smoke. So the bus was actually full of smoke and had mock volunteer victims inside of it. And as you can see, there were other victims strewn around the wreckage. We also had clothing stuffed to simulate deceased victims. And the X there on the runway designates that that runway is closed for use. So initially, ARF set up incident command. They were the first ones on site. Once Santa Barbara County Fire responded and were able to set up, they transfer incident command over to County Fire. It becomes unified command, and then Santa Barbara Fire, our ARF guys, Airport Patrol, law enforcement, operations, AMR, they all work together as a unified command to resolve the incident as quickly as possible. And I've got a list here of our mutual aid responders. And you can see that AMR and County EMS, they set up triage in the field. They separate victims by their type of injury. And I've got some pictures here of that. And then a big part of this drill is the volunteers. So we had volunteers from UCSB, from Santa Barbara City College. A lot of our tenants on the airport came out and volunteered, as well as airport staff. And so we had different types of volunteers. We needed help with the moulage, which is the fake wounds that we apply to look like a real wound. We had volunteer victims, which would be out in the field by the aircraft. Also volunteer distraught friends and family, and that was where the acting students came into play, where they're taking on an emotion of somebody who's been traumatized by a family member in a crash and how they would respond. And we also had one volunteer who it was a security breach for the incident, so that got to exercise our law enforcement capabilities and TSA and the FBI. She did an outstanding job with her performance.
Excuse me, if you back up a minute, because I was there. I think your security breach is the lady in the lower right corner between.
Correct.
You'll notice that she doesn't look exactly big. She put up one heck of a fight.
She did. She was
That's
very
why there are two
realistic.
of them walking her off.
She made multiple attempts to get out to the wreckage and
did.
kept the law enforcement on their toes. She did a great job. And this is a full list of our participants. So as you can see, it's a huge undertaking. We start planning, as I said, months in advance. We work directly with our direct mutual aid responders and plan out their roles and responsibilities. We walk through the duties in the emergency plan with them ahead of time so that we all come out prepared. And then the actual drill lasted about an hour and a half. And then after the drill, we hosted a discussion, kind of a tabletop in here, just reviewing the drill, going over lessons learned. We also have evaluators during the drill that come out and evaluate each type of responder to the drill. So we had somebody evaluating the airport, somebody evaluating EMS, ASA, Santa Barbara Fire, air traffic control evaluated, and we also had a FEMA instructor that came out and evaluated the drill for us. So overall, we had about 150 people here for the drill, about 50 volunteers, and it was definitely a success. Are there any questions?
Yeah, what didn't work? What did we learn?
What did we learn?
Yeah.
What didn't work?
The communication is always the biggest takeaway, just increasing communication. Overall, the different mutual aid groups worked pretty well together. We did a lot of planning ahead of time, and I think that helped. We had planned to bring in a mock aircraft that was going to be a nice fiery show, and that didn't actually pan out.
He
but
broke
the
down
biggest,
in Arizona.
the biggest takeaway was some improvements for our Friends and Family Center and a few small tweaks to the emergency plan.
Well, it sounds like we were well prepared.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So one takeaway from this would be that as long as you can prepare in advance far enough, you can be ready for an emergency.
Well, the emergency plan is designed to, we practice this on purpose so that when it does happen, we know the steps, we know who's doing what, and we make sure that we've got all of our roles covered. So in that regard, we're pretty well prepared, but there's always improvements to be made.
And one important element, especially here in the county, the city and county frequently work together on responses, especially with your multi-casualty medical. And the county has a new plan that they initially tested in our last drill. They made changes to it, improved it, and tested it again in this drill, and were able to have an opportunity to do some good evaluation of the triage in their plan. So they were pleased with that. And one element we did not mention was that Cottage Hospital in Goleta took advantage of this. As you probably know, hospitals also have to have drills for their emergency rooms. And so they too received some volunteers from City College and their own organizations. They had the same injury cards that we put on our victims that are the typical injuries you'd find in a large trauma incident, and they processed them in through their emergency rooms. So we had two groups of folks. In the past, when budgets were bigger and the agencies had additional staff, and we were able to actually transport people to the hospitals. But this time around, what we did was just have two different sets of victims, so everybody got to play spending less money.
I have a question. Who's responsible if there's an accident that doesn't happen at the airport, but it's aviation? Who puts that plan together?
We would respond to a limited degree. It depends on where it happens. If something happened offshore, Coast Guard would get involved. Again, it's mutual aid and just depends on the jurisdiction and what the area is. Ultimately, the FAA and the NTSB have authority over the accident site. And then we would rely on whatever mutual aid, law enforcement, or fire is in that area to help preserve the scene.
Yeah, it's going to be whatever jurisdiction it ends up in.
So
will
they
be
all have a
relayed.
plan for anything that might not happen here at the airport?
Affirmative.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. This was a significant airline that crashed that killed people and had lots of injuries, and that was an Alert 3? What's an Alert 4?
A bomb threat.
Oh, all right. Okay. I wondered how much worse could it get? Any other questions?
Yeah, I was curious. Thank you, Kelly. Who at the airport ultimately is at the top of the pyramid of collecting and analyzing all the data from the drill and disseminating, okay, there are some takeaways that, things that we want to improve, and then disseminate, where does that fall?
That would be me.
That would be you.
Yeah.
And so, has that happened yet, or is that in the process of being?
It's in process. We've got all the notes from the critiquers, and we're getting info from the responders and seeing where we can make tweaks and improvements.
And then you put all that together,
Yeah,
and then
put together a
you become
report afterwards.
responsible for
Correct.
disseminating that back
That'd
out.
be nice
Yes.
to know.
And then next year, when we do a tabletop and exercise the
You bring
plan,
that in.
it'll be incorporated.
One point of clarification, you asked about if it happens off airport. When I mentioned the county's multi-casualty incident plan that they exercised, that's what's used whether it's on the airport or off, whether it's an airplane, a train, or a massive freeway incident. It's all broken metal and people. So they respond in the same fashion.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, next is the Southern California Metroplex. Recommendation that the Airport Commission receive a presentation on the implementation of the Southern California Metroplex, which changes flight paths beginning November 2016.
Yes,
It's not a
and
general theater.
November it begins. You have at your place a new map that goes into effect. It looks like November 10, 2016 for the procedures, and also a list of public webinars that have taken place. And I guess, tomorrow is the last two that are going to take place. And I know that Kelly listened to one, I think, last night?
Monday night.
Monday night, sorry. And you want to briefly give some input? And Tracy, too.
I'll go ahead and give her the notes.
I think this is important because it is new procedures and they do start quickly, even though they've been in process for years.
So that basically there's three new total, one arrival and two departure procedures. They will be published November 10th and can be utilized. Doesn't mean that they will always be utilized, but they can be utilized effective that date. The two biggest takeaways are, one, that there's no new overflights over Santa Barbara area. The routing is still going to bring aircraft in over the ocean, and none of the new arrivals or departures are going to conflict with our existing noise abatement procedures. The arrival, it's called a pit bull arrival. They all have unique names. That one, it's basically allowing air traffic control to work better with pilots and with LA Center on arrivals, give a little bit more safety and reduce confusion, minimizing the amount of turns and making their arrival smoother, basically more
Kelly, is
efficient.
the pit bull, is that the one that deconflicts the approach with San Diego and LA?
Correct.
I had used the deconflict word.
And then the departures are called gouge departure and mission departure. And they're RNAV departures. Again, they're not going to impact the city. The departures will be out over the ocean. And it just provides additional safety for the flights and a little more fuel economy, all the reasons why the Metroplex is occurring.
And I believe the RNAV is about the same as existing, except it'll be RNAV from the satellite rather than ground-based.
Okay. Any questions, comments?
No, but I would probably point out that most of these really only apply to airliners and jets, since these are how to get people out of our airport into the high altitude structure, or from the high altitude structure into the airport. So mostly, unless you're flying a high altitude jet or an airliner, you're not going to see or notice much change.
Thank you. That sounds good. Okay,
Thank you.
next, the Hollister, 6100 Hollister Avenue final project, that the Airport Commission receive a presentation of the final project that has been approved by the Planning Commission.
We did go to Planning Commission on October 6th, and prior to going to Planning Commission, you'll recall that we had an initial visit with ABR and received comments from ABR. And what you'll see tonight is the incorporation of those comments into the site and the buildings themselves. And then the next step would be going to ABR final for their comments on October 24th. So tonight I've asked Lee Reynolds just to give you an update on the changes in the site plan and the buildings that have been made. Lee?
Thank you, Hazel. Good evening, Airport Commissioners. As Hazel said, this is a brief report, not like Andrew's or Kelly's, so if you have a question, hold those till the end. First, I just want to review, we went to ABR on March 29th, and they really had positive comments for the project, but they did have 3 recommendations for us. The first was to add more trees to the frontage along Hollister. This slide is a rendering with more trees. When we first went, we really just had kind of a drainage swale there, so there's more trees. The second recommendation was to try to differentiate the buildings along Hollister with some type of feature. It could be color, it could be an architectural feature. They just ask us to do something. So what you'll see in this slide and the ones after it are two-tone on the buildings, and that's meant to kind of mimic the way the mountains look from Hollister. So it doesn't show up real well in that slide, but you can see it on the top of the building. And then the third item they ask us to do, and you can't see it in this slide, is they ask us to increase pedestrian access to the east retail space, and we've done that as well. So I'll go through these. So again, this slide is just showing you the total build out. It's roughly 50,000 square feet, about 42,000 square feet is light industrial, and the retail spaces are about 8,000 square feet. You have 4,000 on each corner, both at David Love and at Lopez. This slide shows phase 1. We're going to construct 5 buildings first, 1 retail there at Lopez and Hollister, and then the next 4 are all light industrial buildings. This is a slide of the light industrial building from Hollister with pretty much full trees. There's not a lot of trees in the area just north of the sidewalk because that is a detention basin, so it's not really intended to have trees. So we have more trees along the sidewalk than up against the buildings. The next slide is a slide of the retail space. You can kind of see the patio there. This is at Lopez and Hollister. And then this is a slide of the entrance from Hollister to that retail space on Lopez. This is off the sidewalk from Hollister. And that's, it's stamped concrete, so it's kind of meant to look like a bridge. And if you've been down at Chase Palm Park in those bridges there, they have that same stamped concrete pattern. It looks pretty neat. This slide is showing the solar PV we have on the project. We're complying with the city's general plan policy, which requires us to provide 30% of the expected power use at the site for the site. And so what we did is we looked at a typical airport tenant, we reviewed their electricity bills, and then we extrapolated what we would need here to do that. So that's how we intend to meet the solar guidelines for the city. This slide shows the stormwater compliance with the city's Tier 3 requirements. We do that by, first of all, capturing the stormwater, and we capture the stormwater from the site to the north of the new Wallace-Becknell Road. We capture all of the stormwater from Wallace-Becknell Road, as well as the stormwater from all of our buildings. All of that runs through detention basins, primarily on the southern side of the site. There's also one on the west side of the site there. That stormwater is captured, and then it's treated when it goes through the detention basin. We have a percolation. Basically, it's a trench filled with gravel through the bottom of that, so it's treated, and then it's also detained, and it's detained by the capacity of the basin, as well as we have a weir, and what we have to do, because we have more impervious pavement when we finish the project than before, we have to allow our discharge rate to be equal to what it is now, no greater. So we basically hold water on site to mimic the 2, 5, 10, and 25-year storms like they are now. All of that was approved by Planning Commission, so that's good news. This slide shows the landscaping plan. The bottom photos are photos from a building. It's the Ocean Sciences building at UCSB. We're kind of mimicking their landscape plan. It's all native landscaping. Theirs is native to the Channel Islands. We're not going that far, but the trees in front are generally, we have oak trees, sycamore trees, we have strawberry trees. We have one of those right outside admin here, and some olive trees, and then we have a lot of grasses in front and kind of lower shrubs. So you won't see, agapanthus or anything like that out there. That's our plant palette. I know you can't really see that well, and I can't either. You certainly can't read the words under it, but basically all natives. And if you've been by that building at UCSB, it really looks neat. And when you drive by, you have to realize there's a detention basin there, and you can't even see it. And so that's what we're aiming for. We're aiming to have this detention basin that you don't even know is a detention basin at the front. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them or try to answer them.
Questions or comments? Can you back up to one of the slides that shows an overhead view? Any one of them?
Sure.
Is the area on the other side, actually,
No.
not of the buildings, but of the site?
Right.
There you go.
Okay.
The other side of Wallace-Becknell Road, is that where just for perspective, is that where the DRA development is?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
And the spot there just to the west of the DRI, I don't recall that from the original.
When DRI completed their survey for their particular project, that is a parcel that was not needed for their development. And so they actually, instead of getting 8.5 acres, they purchased 7.993 acres, leaving us that little bit amount, which accommodates another small building for light industrial development.
Okay.
That's how come it's there.
And then the other question is, I was involved at the subcommittee that reviewed this way back when, and at the time, I don't believe that solar was part of the project. And while I'm all in favor of solar near a runway, we would certainly have to make absolutely certain of the glare. How would we address that? Because that's going to be basically in the final for probably 1.5 left, I believe, or at least very close, a little bit.
It'd be east of 1.5
So
left
it'll be
or
on the
right.
base lake for
Yeah.
1.5 left.
I believe we still have to do a glare analysis.
And
for
submit
it.
that to FAA.
Right.
Okay, so FAA requires a glare analysis on,
I'm not sure of the
Thank you.
specifics, how far off final you're required to do one, but I believe we'll probably have to do one, yes. And it's always been a part, we just hadn't developed it to the extent we have now, because the city requires solar on any city-constructed building.
okay,
Just like they require bicycle storage. And we also, in this particular one too, needed to add a shower facility for those individuals who would bike to work and have the need for a shower. So we have incorporated that in the design as well.
okay. Well, as long as it doesn't glare, it's great.
Yeah, we should remember that the rental car facility on David Love Place has a lot of solar, far in excess of this, and that, I think, is on final, right? And we've never had a problem with that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? I think we go to the director's report
you.
now. Thank you very much.
I won't just identify a couple of items tonight. In particular, I'm really very, very pleased with September's traffic. Yes, indeed. As you'll notice, we're up 10.41% for this September over September a year ago. Dallas is doing extremely well. You'll see American Airlines is up 20%. We're thrilled with that, and year-to-date, we're at 3.5%. So that's getting us back incrementally. We still have a long ways to go, but we're working on it, and I think these numbers illustrate that.
I noticed that this is 4 months in a row that we've gone up.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Yes, indeed. And the Dallas flight and also the additional flight with Seattle, with Alaska going to Seattle, that has also been very helpful. But they're up as well, and so was United. We also, this month, I believe, Alaska had a small event where they introduced the E-175, Emory Air 175 aircraft. And of course, United has a couple of those on flights to San Francisco, and I'm not sure if they're going to Denver yet. But so we are getting an upgauge in aircraft as well, which adds seats. And when I looked at the load factor, generally the load factor for September was 88%. So even though we're getting new seats, we're filling them, and that is what we need to do. The other item I'd like to just point out is the master plan. We continue to work on that, and we did receive several comment letters, and Andrew and our consultant continue to work to respond to those. And at this point, I would think that we would probably circulate the final EIR, if not towards the end of this year, early January. So it's still a work in progress. One other last item, unless you have other comments, the airfield electrical and safety project is completed as of this week, I believe. We added a new beacon to the tower. Interestingly, it was not doing well, and then all of a sudden it kind of quit, and then we received the new beacon, and it was installed this week. Today. Today it was installed. So with the help of maintenance in the tower and other folks, so you have a new beacon out there. So with that, I'll entertain any questions you might have, or comments.
I just wanted to mention that since the last commission meeting, Jeff was on at the Santa Barbara Beautiful Awards presentation, accepted an award for the airport. Jeff, if you'd like to mention that.
Santa Barbara Beautiful recognized the World War II Memorial for its architectural merit. David Black was the designer on that project, and it recognizes the local aviators who lost their lives in World War II, and also recognizes the squadrons that trained here in preparation for World War II. So it was a good project, and it was nice to be recognized by Santa Barbara Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you. I forgot. Thanks.
Do you have an update on the DRI construction project?
Well, as you can visually see, they have completed pretty much all of the demolition of the site and are beginning work on their foundation. They have explained to us that their goal is to do the foundation work before the winter rains. And and also complete at least the initial part of the new Becknell Road, so that they'll have use that road for staging for the rest of their development. So they're underway and really going forward. I'm not sure that the road plans have been issued a permit yet. No, Leaves tell me no, not yet. So, but those have been submitted for review by Public Works. They anticipate being completed, I believe, December of 2017. Here comes Leaf. He coordinates with them.
I think it might be a little bit after that. I think their site improvements might be done then, but then they're going to finish the build-out themselves. So they're moving in phases. Their demo plan is approved, and they're, as Hazel said, just about done with their demo. Their grading plan is next, and their grading is just the rough grading to get it to grade to start their foundation work, and that's another separate permit. So they do plan on doing their foundation work this winter, and the good thing about that, they have like 1,400 piles. They can work through the rain, and just like we did at the terminal. So they'll be here months doing soil piles over there, and hopefully in the spring for them, they'll start their building work, and all the piles will be in. So they'll, as Hazel also said, the road work will start probably in a month or two, because their plans have already been submitted.
And they are bringing in dirt too, right?
Yes, they are, a lot of dirt.
To raise it up, just as we did with the terminal. Because that, while we did the grading and drainage and improvements, we did that north of Batella Road, Keister going back, and Lopez, and David Love Place in 2000, around 2000.
Right.
But parcel 17 was not finished off because we didn't have a project for that, but we knew that it needed additional civil engineering and more dirt added for flood control reasons. So they'll be doing that, as will we.
That's right.
When
The
we
finished
get ready
floor,
for us.
finished floor elevations have to be above the base flood elevation, and over there, that's about 3 foot of fill. So there will be a lot of dirt moving over there soon.
Does that, you mentioned the piling, does that mean there'll be a large steel object sticking up there, a crane or a pile driver or something?
Yes, similar to the one that has been at the hotel site on Robin Hill. It's gone now, but it was here for a couple
A long
months, I
time.
think.
Okay.
It's very busy along that stretch of Hollister these days, isn't it?
Wow.
Anything else?
We haven't even started yet.
Okay, well, I'll just add one note on a sort of a personal basis. Just before coming over here, I made some reservations for my wife and me to go to Hawaii. And I always fly out of Santa Barbara, but just for kicks, I decided to check out Long Beach and LAX. And that's right, I could have saved $100 round trip total for the two of us by going down to LAX. I think the Airbus would be $160, and parking would have otherwise. So, so for people who think that flying out of Santa Barbara is expensive, you might want to actually check it out and look again, because
there.
it isn't.
Thank you.
With that,
Any other commercials we'll take?
Endorsements.
with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.